ever wondered how your recovery time for the common cold or flu or even small infections seems to get shorter after you have been exposed to it and successfully recovered for the first time? It is because of the adaptive immunity, or simply called as the acquired immunity. It has a specific antigens in which strategically mount an immune response. So, to get to know more about this, we will use a conceptual framework to know and to discuss what is this adaptive immunity.
Now let's discuss the adaptive immunity. The adaptive immunity can be divided into two. It can be cell-mediated immunity and antibody-mediated immunity. The antibody-mediated immunity has a group of lymphocytes called B cells and has a B cell receptors, while the cell-mediated immunity has a group of lymphocytes called T cells and have T cell receptors. Both B cells and T cells originate from stem cell in red bone marrow, but B cells mature in the red bone marrow, then enters the blood and lymphatic tissue, specifically to the lymph nodes. While the T cells also it originate to the red bone marrow, but it mature in the thymus, then goes to the blood and lymphatic tissues, and goes to the lymph nodes. Now let's discuss the T cells. The T cells is the protection against intracellular antigen. It is the delayed hypersensitivity. It has two different kinds, the helper T cell and the cytotoxic T cell. The helper T cell have a glycoprotein called CD4, which helps connect the helper T cells to the macrophage by binding the MHC class II molecules. This is the major histocompatibility complex molecules, which are the glycoproteins that have a binding site for antigens. Also, it is described as the serving tray. This results the helper T cell to produce two daughter T cells, where it can be stimulated to divide again, or it can stimulate B cells and cytotoxic T cells. Both produces cytokines, where the cytokines can be the interleukin 1 or so-called the interleukin 2. Now let's move on to the cytotoxic T cells. It also have a glycoprotein called CD8, which helps connect the cytotoxic T cells to the cells displaying MHC class I. It produces daughter T cells, namely the cytotoxic T cell and the memory T cell. The cytotoxic T cell is the cell-mediated response or the primary response in the cell-mediated immunity, while the memory T cell is the secondary response and it is a long-lasting. The cytotoxic T cell can release cytokines and it kills cells within contact. Now let's move on to the B cells. The B cells is the immediate hypersensitivity. It is a protection against extracellular antigen. The B cells will connect or use the MHC2 and produces two daughter B cells, just like the other, namely the plasma cells and the memory B cells. The plasma cells is the primary response, and it produces antibodies, or usually called the gamma globulins or the immunoglobulins. The immunoglobulins has 5 different kinds. These are the IgG, which is the main antibody of primary responses, best at fixing complement, and the monomer of IgM that serves as the B cell receptor. Next is the IgM. The IgM is the main blood antibody of the secondary responses. It neutralizes toxins and opsonization. Third one is the IgA. It's secreted into mucus, tears, saliva, and colostrum. The fourth one is the IgE. It is the antibody of allergy and antiparasitic activity. For the last one is the IgD. It is the B cell receptor. Now for the memory B cells, it is the secondary response, and it produces a new memory B cells. So T cells and B cells are related to each other. Because of T cells produce helper T cells, these stimulate to produce plasma cell that has antibodies. Before B cells activated, it must phagocytize and process the same antigen that activated the helper T cell.
The adaptive immunity is activated by the pathogens and uses an immunological memory to learn the threat and to enhance the response accordingly. The immune response is much slower to respond to the threat and the infections. But let us not be overconfident with this. Always remember that prevention is better than cure. Thank you and stay safe.